A warm good evening to one and all. From a facade to a high rise. Let's end this week with a spectacular webisode Facade in High Rise. Today's webinar is sponsored by Everest New Age Building Solutions. I would like to now introduce our stars for today's exciting session. Mr. K.R. Suresh, Director Axis Facades, moderator for today's session. Panelists on board are Architect Nilab Nagar, Senior Associate Architect Hafiz Contractor, Architect Roop Chanda, Associate Director RSP India, Mr. Gautam Bhasin, India Head Inhabited Group, Mr. Rahul Chopra, CEO Everest. I hope everyone has an interesting session. Thank you. Handing over to you, Mr. Rahul Chopra.
Thank you very much. Just to introduce myself, I am Rahul Chopra, the CEO of Boards and Panels for Everest Industries Limited. I have been a 32-year veteran in the building construction industry. Been working with the same company. We are in the business of roofing, pre-engineered steel buildings, smart steel buildings, and boards and panels, which I head. Besides that, we have also ventured towards the solar area of solar, and we have solar solutions, rooftop solar solutions, which we offer the market today. I'm going to briefly present to you something about fiber cement boards being used as facades. They're gaining in prominence as a facade material for building construction. And essentially, I'm going to share pictures with you of various kinds of applications which have been done with the use of fiber cement boards as facade material. This all you know, facades help save energy. They help in making buildings more sustainable. And moving with times, let's reimagine our facades with fiber cement boards produced by Everest. So we are the largest fiber cement board manufacturer in India, and we have a complete system for facades which help you reduce your operating cost, wastage, and energy demands. You own 4 lead points and Griha points, and you can choose from a variety of attributes that the product provides and what you need. So this is what they essentially call a siding. It's a wood cladding kind of material without being wood actually. This is again the cement wood planks which have been used in a hotel in Goa called the W. Here they've been used in the white color, extensively used. Here we have something known as the heavy duty fiber cement board, which has a higher density and a higher MOR, a wet MOR of above 15 MPa. This is used for a external cladding in a mall and a hotel. The hotel is known as a Swiss Hotel in Calcutta. Here again, fiber cement boards have been used for a hotel in Durgapur, West Bengal, for a Fortune hotel. You can see it's been painted in red color. This is being used in Gujarat. The carving has been done on fiber cement boards. These are motorized louvers made out of fiber cement boards, which have been used again in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. The external cladding with heavy duty fiber cement boards. A lot of people like using it in the raw form. This is again a view of the Swiss Hotel as well as the wall in front of it, done about 10 years back. This is the Al Namra Tower in Kuwait. It's a tall building there where fiber cement boards have been used. 3 sides of the building have been clad in glass, and 1 side has been done in fiber cement board cladded with stone on top of it. These are again some other pictures. I will just skip through it, where fiber cement boards have been used for facade material. Another area where it's gaining a lot of prominence is in the what we call insulated facade systems. And I'll just give you a short glimpse of it, where a fiber cement board is used to achieve energy efficiency, durability, design flexibility, moisture control, and also control fire. After a few fires that have taken place worldwide, and one of them in England was known as the Grenfell fire. Suddenly, fiber cement board has started gaining prominence as a facade material and are being extensively used as a facade material worldwide. This is just to show you how it's been done with some insulation material on top of it, and you can get a excellent facade after rendering it and painting it. There's a stone finish also available, and that's it. And that's what I wanted to cover. And I hope you find this interesting. Any questions, we'll be happy to take later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Rahul.
Yeah.
I think now we can start with the introduction. We just want to, before starting the panel discussion, I think we should basically brief on what we want to actually express in this panel discussion. So I would request Nilab to, show a few slides on what he's expecting and what is this design experience in high-rise buildings. Nilab, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Suresh, for this inviting us and all for this nice panel discussion on facade. It's one of those relevant topics that we'll all need to address at some point. So I would like to start my presentation with some of the experiences that I've had with my travel around the world, and I found some interesting facades which have quite memorable in their the way they have been done and for the purpose for which they have been done. So let me start with one of my first visits quite some time ago, about 15 years ago, I think, when the Jinmao building was done. I happened to go there as soon as it was finished, and I was quite stunned by the way the stainless steel cladding was done on a building so high and in such immaculately finished product. Then, and right from the base right till the top, the number of facets that there were and everything else that this building had, and the way it was, the top of the building itself, also the crown, the way it was done. I think the entire thing was quite modular and unitized in its execution. And even in a unitized curtain wall system, they could bring in a fair amount of detailing and relief, as they call it. So this was one of the first thing which fascinated me, the facade. The second one, which I'd like to show, was the Gunzhou Tower, which I saw about 4 years ago, I think. Yeah. And this facade, which is interesting for me because the skin of the building itself is the structural element. And also they have used the building as for the multimedia capabilities, which I think is also one of those key facade elements that we must understand, that building, besides its protective nature of the facade, it's also an expressive nature of the facade, wherein you can celebrate the city and celebrate the events and national importance, and the building that way speaks to the entire city. So in that way, this Gunzhou Tower has got a very vantage point, and it kind of celebrates the various occasions that the city undergoes. Burj Khalifa, of course, being the tallest building, has always been a fascination. The detailing in this building with its external fins and the way the curtain wall mullions and everything has been detailed out, and the fact that you've also got a very nice multimedia facade on this has also and been seen by the entire world whenever the New Year's or any other events happen. So facade, again, in this building expresses itself both as a protective thing and as well as an expression to the city. The last building which I wanted to see was the Gensler's building, the Shanghai Center at Shanghai, which is a double skin facade. So here the envelope is acting like a thermal barrier as well as controlling the temperature of the building, and the way, and there's an inner skin and an atrium in between the building and the outside. So this and the double skin kind of acts like an envelope, like a courtyards within the courtyards, and they have got about 6 such courtyards in that entire 110 stories or extra, whatever that building has. Then coming to our own Indian experiences, I would like to share this couple of my buildings here. On the building on the left is Windsor Grand Residences in Andheri. Here, the challenge was, of course, the glass railing for that height. It is just next to the sea. It had since this was a very high-end apartment, the intention was to use a very slimline series. Ultimately, we had 4 or 5 mock-ups done, and we selected one vendor which had the slimmest of that series. And at that point of time, about 6 years ago, it was quite this thing. So it was all imported sections, and now I think the Indian vendors are also coming up and making the similar ones here. The one on the right is the building we are doing at Noida. Here is where we were exploring the idea of a kind of a part curtain wall, part rain screen ventilated facade for the dead walls as well as for the top part of it. The challenge here was the underside soffit of the building when you have a tall building and you have to put up the scaffolding and how you have to maintain it. So we came up with solutions wherein we had this gantry which would run between the buildings and kind of help both the workers to clad it as well as later on to maintain it. So these have been some of the challenging projects that we've worked on. And then I would also like to share with you some of our recent projects. The one on the left, the first one is the ITC Grand Central, where we used clay bricks from Australia, and we dry cladded the entire building with clay bricks along with the regular curtain wall. So this is one of the first, I think, innovative clay bricks before the terracotta facades and everything came in. We managed to do this, a small entity which was clipped onto the facade. On the Twin Towers at Tardev, which is the Imperial Tower 1 and 2, has got fire-rated aluminum composite panels in its thing, and that was also the challenging. This is, I think, in this building and the next one, which is the Marina Bay, the 23 Marina at Dubai, one of the tallest buildings in the residential buildings in the world. Both these buildings have fire-rated aluminum composite panels in their facade, and both had to undergo wind engineering tests to make the facade happen, and the detailing and everything else came from that. So it's very important that we undertake sufficient tests both under wind tunnels as well as subsequently under the testing systems which kind of determine how the facade will behave under various conditions, and after that only we start installing it. This is an interesting project which I wanted to show you because this is next to the airport. This has also got a double skin facade. There's an inner facade which has got a triple layer laminated glass for sound, and then we have an external facade of GRC and glass which is also a laminated glass. So we have got 5 layers of laminated glass and GRC, both for 2 reasons. One is that because it's an airport project, it had to have a certain amount of security concerns. So it kind of had to ensure that I think a .78 caliber bullet cannot go through from the room outside. And the second was the 100 decibel noise level which the aircrafts came out with, and they had to be, and the room inside had to maintain a 32 dB noise criteria. So a 5 layer of laminated glass with about 600 mm air gap between the outer facade and the inner facade, we managed to get a very quiet rooms in this 5-star hotel. And that is that's it from me.
Thanks. Now I'd request Anup to speak about his experience on projects and tell us more about how complicated a facade can get.
Let me start introducing myself. I'm Roop. I'm an associate director with RSP out of Bangalore. Primarily deal with commercial buildings, some of the projects, and I got this opportunity to kind of share one of the buildings that is under construction right now. We've been seeing a lot of high-rise buildings that have been happening in the major big cities, Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore. The reason I picked this up is this project came across our table about 3-4 years back. And this is out of Kochi. And this will be the tallest building in Kochi, in that part of the world. And has turned out to be quite an experience for us, very interesting. Firstly, because over there aren't as many tall buildings, and the local trade, and the people over there, it was a new experience for them. So this building that you see is in the smart city in Kochi that's coming up, and it's about 33 stories high, plus 3 levels of parking, and further 3 levels of automated parking, robotic parking. And over here, what we have tried to do, because this is the first building, and, the client wanted that to be a landmark. There were lots of other considerations floated, because of which we ended up creating two narrow slits of buildings, which are like twin towers. And in terms of facade, the client did not want a complete single system. He wanted two kind of textures to come out. And that's what we kind of try to get out, textual difference between the lower half of the building and the upper half of the building. Where the part which looks like punched windows, single windows, is actually 3 stories high, and those are structural glazings too. And the upper one is, of course, a complete curtain wall structural system. And it's a steel building, so all the interfaces and everything were kind of new. All the details that had to be drawn out was new. The structural, I'll go to the next slide. The structural system, there were lower facades also, which were relatively easier. Given so high exposure, the selection of glass was also very important, and our facade consultants helped us out with all that. And overall, the engineering was very complex in terms of taking into consideration windows and so on and so forth, was very complex. For the punched windows, the interfaces, because we used prefabricated panels where we did not have glazing, how to do the interfaces over there using local technology, because the panels were coming out locally from there, the prefabricated panels. So the overall experience was pretty detailed and complex. And so this is another view of the nighttime that we created. Right now, the core is being constructed. We are up to 18th floor. The building in the next year, well, we don't know what will happen now, but the scheduled opening of the building is supposed to be next year. So we'll see where.
Thanks. Hi, guys. Now I would request Gautam to talk about some of his experience in high-rise and talk about more of facade engineering, you can say.
Hi. Thanks, Suresh. And thanks to IDAC team for still sort of keeping the mantle high and still marching on with flags with webinar as a format, which is again quite interesting. I will share some of our experience in high rises and what are the challenges that one can foresee with different building approaches, different architectural approaches, and what's the way to address some of the key challenges from a technical standpoint, from a constructability standpoint. The building that you're looking at is Tencent Seafront Tower. It's in Shenzhen, south of China. That basically was more of a multi-office effort. A lot of our people were involved, along with our staff in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. Shenzhen, as most of you might know, it's basically the Google of China. So they control anything and everything that's to do with the web, to do with communication, chatting, gaming, etc. So they are a really big conglomerate. And as a part of their consolidation efforts, they decided to move into one building. Now, when you start building tall to build a statement, it really starts taking a toll on the functionality of it, because everybody's separated to connect with each other. So I think one of the briefs for NDBJ, the architects, was that you have to have some connectivity. or some collaborative spaces. So they split the entire program into 2 towers. One that was to do with broadcasting, the other that was to do with all communications and tech. And then they decided to connect it at 3 levels. One was about collaboration, one was health, and one was communication. So you see those 3 horizontal bridges that connect the 2 towers. The one on the left is 180 meters, one on the right is about 250 meters. What typically ends up happening in large flat surfaces that they tend to look really monotonous, and they tend to give a very poor reflection of what's around you. So it's basically living in a city of mirrors almost. So what the architects decided to do was to start creating some level of articulation in the facade. So what you're looking at in a more close-up view here, on the left is what we call as vertical sawtoothing. So if you cut the building in section, you will see a zigzag profile, and onto the right of the edge is what we call as horizontal sawtoothing, which is when you cut the building in plan, you'll see again a jagged edge. And that's to basically create some level of interest, because if you suddenly imagine this building to be fully glazed with nothing on it as articulation or features or fins, it starts to look very dematerialized, because it starts to reflect the skies as is, and it has a very poor presence. And then it completely depends on the quality of glass, the quality of reflectivity, the flatness of the material, etc. Here's another view to sort of really accentuate how complex the geometry was. And this is the apex of the taller tower with the Tencent logo on it. And you can see the articulation of the vertical sawtoothing. Each of the panel from the base or the vertical plumb of the slab edge leans out almost 700 mm. And then it leans back again to 0, and then leans out again to 700 mm. And then there were opportunities to incorporate operables in it to basically create some level of ventilation for spaces that required to be ventilated, or some level of smoke extract strategies there. Now, when a building like that comes through, professionals like us really need to start finding some method to the madness. It's basically articulations all over the place. They're not uniformly articulated. So there are inward leaning panels, there are outward leaning box panels, and there are inward leaning flat panels. So we need to start identifying the A's, the B's, the C's in the entire surface. So it starts generating some level of modularity in the way facade has to be approached. So what we did was to identify, color code them, and then that also helps the contractor establish a program of how many A's, B's, C's do you need for each floor. So instead of having all A's on the building at once, you have floor by floor completion, which means you keep sealing your building, move on to the next floor, and then you move on to the next floor and gradually complete the building in a sequential manner. So what you're looking at on the screen, the color codes identify the common theme or the commonality between panels. So all the types are identified here. Now, to achieve the articulation, now again, you can attach features to a facade, which could be vertical fins, which could be horizontal fins, or any form of geometry tweaks. But to physically incline a facade, which is not building dependent, your building slab edge is still perfectly vertical, but you need to incline your panels in and out. The idea behind this was to not play with a well-functional unitized system, which is interlocking mullions, which basically lie here at the back of the building, and then the glass basically gets projected out by outrigger system. So it's basically got aluminium framework that pushes the glass out, creating a box-like assembly which can then be hooked onto the building. So the weather barrier or the elements that keep the air and the water out are still perfectly vertical at the back of it all, and then there is a second layer of framework that basically pushes the glass out. Now, obviously, you need to test it out with, how efficient is this methodology, whether it can all be built. So you collaborated with contractors to try out some mock-ups with existing sections. So here's one single floor panel that really required some level of buildability studies as well. So this was almost an industry collaboration running back and forth between the design team and construction teams. The other component that was really challenging and that changes the perspective of how you approach design is the need to complete it on time, which is China has very strict regulations around the committed time frame, and if you don't complete it in time, you get penalized quite heavily, including the land prices and the taxes you have to pay on it. So everything had to be worked backwards onto a drawing board, the approach that will save you time during construction. So the building can continue going up. Even when it's half the way up, you don't see any facade on it. But as it goes above the midway level, the facade slowly starts creeping up the building and starts catching up with the structural progress. What you see here is the horizontal sawtoothing. Now, the vertical sawtoothing was in a way quite extreme. It had to be a secondary stair or framework that allowed you to lean the building outwards. But the horizontal sawtoothing was a very small projection. But what it helped do was you needed to have framework, which is the one at the top, which is in the section B here, and the one below, which is the corresponding frame below, to have some sort of a taper. And extrusions run straight. They always have a consistent cross section right across its length. So in order to achieve a variable cross section, the approach taken was that you'll have multi-chambered extrusions, which still allow some level of strength into the extrusion even after you taper or you chamfer it at an angle. So if you look at the diagram on the bottom right, that is basically a multi-chamber extrusion that allows you to chamfer it off at an angle, and then you have an adjusting cap that goes on top of it, which then allows you to glaze it in front. So you can actually create the sawtoothing without a second tier, without a second layer of extrusion incorporated in it. So two very different approaches for two different elevations of the same building. But again, it sort of really highlights how different challenges can be catered to with different approaches. And with that, I'll just end my presentation.
Thanks, Gautam. Very interesting. I think you have made it really complicated, and the panel discussion can go very well now. So we can start a panel discussion. So the last part is basically a project in Istanbul, which is the Alliance Towers, and it's basically, it's a high-rise. It's a 45-story building with a screen, and it's got aluminum screen in front of it. It looks very simple in terms of just the basic facade, but if you look, it's like a crystal-shaped building. And I think I would like to touch base on the BMU and the maintenance part of it for such a building. So basically, what we are trying to do in this panel discussion is just to come up with pointers so that our panel discussion has, it becomes more constructive, and it gives a good takeaway for the audience. So if you look at this building, the inspiration, I would just run through this. Now, if you look at the top of the building, it's like it's got all inclinations and it's very difficult to clean. So if you see these punchers, these are basically for the outriggers of the building maintenance unit to come out and clean the building. And they've got, this is the actual, and this is the rendering. There's a study what has been done. The energy consultant has done study, and that's how the screens have come up. The pattern of the screen is basically based on a software which has given them the the comfort level, the shading, the glare, and the radiation study which they've done, and that's how they've come up with this whole model and whole energy efficiency of the building. And this is how it is. So this is the screen. It's a simple screen. It's an expanded aluminum screen, which is generally available, but they put a bronze shade to it. This is how it is. There's a view from inside, looking out, and so you see less of glare coming in, and plus it also helps in terms of a working environment in the building. With this, I would like to start the panel discussion, and have my esteemed panelists to contribute in terms of telling us how and in what way can the industry develop themselves so that they can build something, build a high-rise very effectively, and the main key thing is about facade engineering. So I would like to ask to all the panelists that why is facade engineering so complex? Is it complex because there is no educational system, there's no system available in the industry, or is it because it is more to do with experience and more to do with ideas coming out from our architects? They come up with new ideas and then it becomes complicated. There's no set rule like MEP, and there are set rules in MEP and elevators that this is what you require. But in architecture, you can do whatever you want. So is that what is the role of having facade engineering so complex? I would ask the architects first.
Okay, let me start. It is, I think, chicken and egg situation. Earlier, we could, whatever technology was available, we designed within that. So a lot of high rises, in fact, most of the high rises are effectively doesn't have an external cladding. They have concrete walls and window systems. But when certain software developed, because there was some architects were driven to the fact that they wanted to create something new, so started exploring options in cladding, and then they started using more software, which were probably not for our industry, but for aerospace and other industries, which could then articulate or kind of analyze the complexities that they wanted to create, and that in turn generated a whole series of buildings and claddings which could then use their software, and then it became common practice for doing it. Then recently, I think probably 10 years ago, when parametrics came into the field, then they could understand that each panel could effectively be measured and fabricated. Then it opened up another wave of facade engineering, which could then have almost no limits to it. But then we also have interface issues, which we find that while glass and aluminum have always been the favorites in terms of how it's been designed, and there's a fair amount of knowledge which has passed through generations, we still don't have too much of that in terms of when we come to newer materials and how you integrate, for example, GRC with the main facade, or you integrate some of these things. So that is the learning which I think the industry is going through, and which will create far more opportunities now.
Anup, what is your thought on that? Why do you make complicated buildings?
Well, I think that's the market demand to make complicated buildings, and obviously to stand out. But I will tag along to whatever Nilab just mentioned, and I kind of agree with him, and I'll just kind of expound a couple of other points. As Nilab said, previously, especially in the context of the subcontinent, facades were primarily solid facades. You had brick, concrete, everything was solid. And suddenly we have all this new material, new technology, both soft as well as hard technology that's come in. That's brought in a lot of moving parts. You have thousands of nut bolts, frames, hundreds of things which we were not used to, and which requires added additional expertise to put together to withstand all these structural forces, as well as look good, perfect. So, it has become complex because the number of moving parts have increased, and we are in the subcontinent scaling up to where we are competing in terms of facades with the best in the world. So yeah, and that requires some extent of expertise and some extent of complexity. And I think that's an actual progression that we have moved into something more complex, which ought to be complex.
So, Nilab and Anup, I would like to ask you one simple question. In terms of, previously, 15 years back, when we used to design buildings, there was, I don't think there were energy consultants, and there were, wind tunnel experts, wind engineers, basically, trying to, help us out with the study and reports and all that. I think when high-rise came into picture, that's when more expertise have come in, and people have started relying on software more than actual experience. It's all software based. The energy consultant gives you a software, gives you a document which basically you blindly follow it. Is it right or is it wrong? Or is it something which you have something to take away from that?
Nilab, we can't hear you.
Yeah, so my take is like this, that for all these years, India has never been an air-conditioned living systems. We have always been having almost a non-AC, and primarily I would say 90% of our buildings are non-air-conditioned buildings. So there was never a need for an envelope or a performance envelope which would this thing. When the IT and ITES sector started after 2000 is when you had a huge amount of office buildings coming into the architectural fraternity, and then you started enveloping those buildings, mostly mimicking what the West was doing by a lot of curtain wall, which may or may not be climatically suited. Then after having done 10 years of let's say mimicking, or let's say then we have started now becoming far more energy conscious over a period of time. So the last 10 years, I would say, it has been highly responsible. Buildings have come up in terms of the way the facades are being treated, where the shading is happening on the facade, where the care has been taken on the air infiltration and for the energy consumption. And accordingly, along with it came the consultants who became specialized only to address this particular issue. So while the majority of the construction, the residential part, which I would say is the larger built-up area of the whole scheme, doesn't need. It's always been an open, and shading has always been our thing. We've always had balconies. We have always had that. So these energy concerns weren't so great till the time the office buildings came into the thing, and that is how it is. And so we have all of us as a fraternity, we have now become highly responsible, and I find that, and there are somewhere dictates coming in through the energy building codes also, which says that certain amount of glazing cannot be more than 40% of the building facade and things like that. And more and more people are doing passive energy also in terms of orientation of the building, in the terms of how the shading is there. So it becomes integral to the elevation itself. So that way, I think the industry has come quite far in its approach, and it's become more localized instead of, and people are addressing Indian climate and Indian behavioral patterns, Indian glare issue. Glare is an important factor, and noise. So that has come quite ahead, and I think it's.
You mean to say that people have, because of the software, people have got a better idea and better understanding of how the building performs? That's what you're saying?
Yes, softwares have improved, but softwares can tell you about the entire energy consumption. But in any case, the energy consumption was always been an MEP subject. So what they used to do is to understand the thermal values, the U values of the facade, of the whether how much of the glass and how much of concrete or anything has, and then they has to calculate the total envelope, the heat gain through the envelope, and they come up with their figures. What the newer software do is in terms of also tell you about the daylight penetration. It tells you about the actual heat gain through to various means. So it's far more accurate in terms of the thing. So, but I think the daylight analysis has been a greater as a software, I would say, been giving us a better result than what the earlier MEP team used to do.
But Roop, do you think that this is also a challenge in terms of energy consultant providing a document? And is it basically experience, or is it already there? The science is already, well established.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this. If you ask me, one of my older structural engineers still and can manage to do a complete building structure only by his hand and by his calculation and his book that he creates. And then we had STAD and ETAP, which came in, and the structural engineers could now use the software to analyze. You could physically do it, but then software does it faster for you and can do a far more complex geometry instead of that. Same thing, an MEP consultant can take out the calculation for a heat gain of a building, but then when you have software which can orient itself and take care of the east-west, north-south facade, and if the building is, for example, at a slight angle to the northeast-south facade, then it can also extrapolate the figures from there and give you a far more accurate figure rather than trying to calculate it manually or through Excel tables or things like that.
And also presentation. I think presentation also helps.
And also graphically you can express it better. Graphically also you can express it better.
Right. So, Gautam, what do you think the industry is geared up for such complicated buildings?
No, it's a complex question. I think it depends. I think the design industry, we are almost at par with anybody else in the world. We can, just trying to tag on the discussion of complex softwares and everything else. I think can resolve complex design problems. systems. When it comes to construction, I think that's where the challenges lie. High-rise construction, and I'll talk in the context of high-rise only. I think high-rise, how do we build? How do we fabricate? How do we install? I think those challenges still hound us in our day-to-day practice, and I'm sure everybody agrees. In terms of how do you get material up at that height? How does it behave in sort of high wind scenarios, building movement scenarios? So I think just the general understanding of constructability issues, I think that is still a big question mark. In terms of design, I think we are fairly well equipped to get it right. But when it comes to real implementation on site, real implementation on physical buildings, I think that's where the challenge lies.
So where do you find challenges in terms of clients not understanding the material what you're using for a high rise? Do they consider all materials to be same? This is a question to Rahul and yourself. I think both can answer this because it's a high rise and you have materials which have to be installed on the building. So you don't know whether it's going to last for 50 years or 60 years. But we try to get the most inexpensive material to be put onto the building because it's a quantity. It's a big quantity. So one of you all can answer. Both of you all have the same. No. I think Rahul can answer first. I think you can talk first. You're a material guy.
Your mic is off, Rahul.
No, Rahul, your mic is off.
It's not that a customer chooses the most expensive material. While choosing a facade, he essentially chooses, besides the functionality, what can give him the right aesthetics, what can give him the right identity. Finally, a facade gives a building an identity.
Right.
It gives him the right look. There are other factors related to it in terms of energy efficiency, some insulation, sound insulation, fire performance, etc. But finally, a customer looks at what's the most fit, what is the ideal material which will suit him, and how easy and what systems are available for him to install those products. So that's where sometimes manufacturers come into the fray. They have to come forward and say, look, I can help you and give you some inputs with regard to the design. You can consider it and check it on your own. But you have to pitch in and give a solution. Facade is not something which you can actually go and just give a product and say, here's a product, you use it. You need to give them the entire solution, which includes the framing system, the riveting systems, the fixing systems. Everything has to be given as a total package.
So did you have a situation where you have told a client this is not the material for your building?
Yeah, very often.
Okay. Because that is something which is missing, I feel, in the industry. Everybody wants to sell. It's like a client, they just want to sell the material. So I feel that is something which is knowledge. If you have the knowledge, you say, okay, client, this is not the right material for your building. I think I can come to you for the next building. As simple as that. So in our experience, what we find is whatever the client looks at the most inexpensive, that's what I was just thinking of. And I think, Gautam, I don't know what you feel about it, about materials. I'm talking just about materials, and every material can be checked. In terms of energy consultant can verify it in terms of the U values and the performance of the facade and the system. But the durability.
Yeah, I think my experience there has been a lot of people, a lot of clients, and I mean, obviously they're willing to hear from you what your experience is, but for them, the cost is linear. Like if I do a 5-story building and I install sliding windows in it, I can use the same windows in like a 50-story building as well, without understanding complexities of high wind pressures, insulation, safety, and everything else that comes into play. So I think it's a valid point. And also, I think the market is evolving and changing. There are people who have traveled, there are people who have built buildings that are complex. So clients do come back with expectations and proper learning that, yes, they're willing to listen. But I think the large part of the market still needs to be, you need to explain them the complexity when you go taller, the complexity when buildings are more challenging. And it's not the same solution that you've been doing for the past 20 years.
And Rahul, do you provide a complete solution to the client in terms of engineering, in terms of drawing, shop drawings, and all that? What is generally the practice for suppliers and manufacturers who provide the inputs to the client for a high rise. I'm talking just for high rise.
So for a product or a application like facades, usually when you go to a client, it's not a product alone. It's a composition of products.
Right.
You might. I showed a slide with regard to something called an insulated facade system.
Right.
So our contribution to that is the board, but there's a framing system which goes with it. There's a EPS insulation system which goes with it. There's a vapor barrier that might go with it, and there's a finish which also goes along with it.
Right.
So when you go to a customer, you have to actually go and give him the entire solution. Sure. Tell him, if you want to achieve these results, this is the solution we are recommending. And typically in most of the markets that we've operated with this facade system, and essentially it's been in the UAE and the Western world, you have to go with the total package. And that means you have to have some amount of designing and engineering capability built into your system, which is able to work on these solutions. Of course, you get it validated by experts. There are experts in the field of facade engineering. You get it validated by them. You get it checked by them. You have structural consultants who will also check it and validate it. But just by giving you, this is a composite system. You have to offer a composite system. You can't just offer a product.
Right. So do you also have an applicator who does generally, I'm not talking only of you, I'm talking in general of a material and a applicator. Like, when you have buildings like this, other than curtain wall, a contractor does everything. He fabricates the panel, he glazes it, and he takes the responsibility. But when it comes to other materials, like, cladding, your GFRC or, your EIFS, your stone cladding, they don't take up the responsibility in total. They have a system guy has an applicator who basically installs. Is it something which you have do you face a problem in the market finding the right applicator?
So initially we used to face a problem in the market, but today, working with some people, we have trained the right applicators. Okay. And we have this entire program of working and training applicators and developing applicators. And as time goes by, I think this entire applicator base will keep growing and the quality will also keep improving. So we have some people, very qualified people, some people who, even today, they've been associated with the company for a long time. And we recommend them. It's not always that a client goes with the applicator. He might choose not to go with the applicator. In that particular case, we do send site supervisors, technical people. In this kind of an application, you have to provide those kind of services, after sales services, not just that you propose a product, sell a product, and then you back out. You have to go ahead and recommend an entire system as well as applicator, and depending if the client wants to use them or not, that's his discretion.
Right. Now the question goes to Nilab. When you design a high rise, now I'm specifically coming to maybe a 35-40 story building with glass, and it's complicated, it's got twists and turns and all that. So do you initially, when you design it, when you do the massing, do you even talk to wind engineers? Do you talk to BMU guys? In terms of understanding whether you need to modify the shape a little bit so that you can actually cater to the requirement of the maintenance and the energy consultant and the structure. Do you do that initially when you just?
What I would suggest, I would say that we do that for buildings higher than 50 stories. When we do that, and it's been done in this thing, because anything above 50 stories and a slenderness ratio of less than or more than 1:10, or say let's say 1:8.5. I think our highest, tallest slender building has been 1:8.5. Okay. So then when you start going beyond that, then wind becomes a major factor. So even in a building which is 100 meters high, it depends on its slenderness and its this thing. You start the structural engineers, when they come on board, only they start talking about how the edge of the building will behave, how the wind will go through it, how you will have the vortex effects which will come with that. So then we start the building plans itself starts getting modified to address that. So similarly, when we see in the octagon or the shape which we got for the Imperial Tower, and then what we got for the 23 Marina, came about from those discussions with the structural engineers.
So
So if we start discussing that, then the facade, because whatever happens to this also happens to the facade as well.
Right.
But we realize that at some point of time, especially from the Imperial building, we realize that even though the building is structurally designed for a certain wind force, when the corners of the building, while the building is originally designed for 2.5 kPa, you'll find that the corners are getting a higher of 4.5 kPa forces at that corners, which comes primarily because of the wind engineering. But it doesn't come for the original structural wind engineering. It will come specifically when you do the next set of analysis specifically for the facade. So when we start designing the facade, the elements of the facade, the fixing systems of the facade, then you start bringing in. So I wouldn't say that we start doing those analysis at the start of the building, but since we are aware of from our experience that yes, these things do come into the play, then you start doing your facades, the corners of the buildings, the where you think that it could have a highest danger, then you start designing it accordingly.
So you're saying for the structure, you check the orientation and the wind engineer gives us inputs and all. But for facade, what you're saying is that comes at a later stage when you start enveloping the building. You start massing the building.
No, it becomes a conscious decision to you when you're detailing out the facade. When you do the facade, it's not the facade comes at a stage slightly one step after you have done the basic form of the building. So the basic form of the building starts shaping up, and you say that you meet the program requirements of the building. You say this is many number of flats, or this many number of square feet built up area. You kind of understand the shape and this thing. But then when you come down to the actual fenestration itself, the detailing of the fenestration in terms of it's not going to be one solid glass block, or it's not going to be one solid punched window block or a building like that. So then you start detailing it out. Then these elements start coming at behind your back of your mind, and then the detailing happens accordingly.
And what about BMU? When do you take up BMU as a understanding BMU or understanding the maintenance of the building? Is it after
that comes from the shape of the building itself. If it's a straight shape, it's not a challenge, and we know that from our experience that it doesn't. But when the building starts tapering up, especially let's say for example it happens in both these tall towers, then you start wondering how to hide that BMU as a part of the thing, because the BMU will have to come out. So whether it's an articulated boom which comes out, or whether it's a large cantilevered arm which will come out. So those kind of detailing starts coming in, and then you start wondering how to treat the top of the building accordingly. So that does come into play.
Anup, what is your experience on this in terms of?
On BMU part of it?
No, in terms of everything. Like when you do the massing, do you consider wind? Do you consider energy? And how
Very tricky question. I mean, we have conceived concepts which have been approved by the client. I mean, they've kind of bought the picture. And then when we went ahead and started detailing it out with the facade consultant, we came across a number of complexities which essentially increased the cost of the building. And then we had to kind of draw ourselves back, go back to drawing. So it's a very complex question. If we start getting involved in engineering very early on, we kind of limit ourselves to options in terms of form, shapes. I mean, there are other considerations we have to start considering. But if you do it late, there is a chance. So it's a chicken and egg question. But if we are doing a complex thing, we tend to bring in a facade consultant very early on. That has been my experience, and we start passing sketches to him and asking basic questions, and that has proved beneficial to some of projects. Yeah.
Gautam, what is your experience on this in terms of, as a facade consultant, what do you experience in terms of getting on board on a project, on a high-rise building, and then where do you feel you are at that stage?
Well, normally in the room quite late. That's been my experience. But I think partly sort of drawing from what the architect said, if the building is tall enough for us to justify some level of wind engineering, and I think the idea behind that is really simple. You want the building to be as less resistant to wind as possible. The wind should not resist the wind too much. It should just sort of flow around it and be as aerodynamic as possible. That being considered, I think answers a lot of facade questions as well, because the more resistant it is, the more the facade pressure would be, the more the pressure transferred to the structure, into your foundation. So I think the cost and the impracticalities go high. So I think if that question has been answered before we enter the room, then I think our job becomes easier. But I think at the same time, like Roop said, that we do need to maintain. Let's say if the building moves too much, or if the deflections are too high, if there's way to control it, because that may start significantly attributing to the cost of the facade or the kind of material choices we have to make. There are other questions like, how wide are your panels? How big is your glazing modulation? Those things I think also have an impact on how the building will look. And before all that gets locked in, I think getting those vetted by a sort of technical expert on the table is definitely useful.
Right. Now, one question which I have is, see, in Bombay and in most of India, you've got this bird menace, you've got all these issues which happen. But I find, it's a question to the architects, but I find that a lot of horizontal surfaces come in as chhajas or as sunshades or as, how do we convince a client? Because every client complains about bird menace in Bombay, but every building has got a sunshade. And how do we manage that? It's a very silly question, but it's something which is, I see it in all the buildings.
No, if you do any other, for example, it's a valid question, and that's something which you have been trying to address it for quite some time. And see, horizontal elements are critical because that's the only way you can sunshade the building. Unless you kind of highly spec the glass and try to keep internal louvers or louvers within the glass facade, like a double glazed facade, and those kind of solutions are existing where you don't need a external shading device, but external shading devices are very, very critical to the way it is. And it also depends on the way the bylaws are written. So if you can, for example, you can still have the same shading device with a, let's say, a punched window, not necessarily having a cantilevered fin coming out. But then there is an FSI implication, so people won't want to do it in terms of losing area for creating the shade and doing it. But if you create too much of the sloping horizontal elements, then you have an element of dust. So you can't have dust also in a building. When you start having inclined glasses or you start having that, then the glass, then it becomes dirty. Indian weather is not suited for the kind of cities that we have. It is fairly gets dusty and this thing. So you have to create a balance between the horizontal and the vertical elements and make sure that you don't collect this thing. So, but then there are solutions which are not so things to create those little spikes that you need to do. We tend to do that mostly for our classical building facades where you don't have a choice but to make all those cornices and brackets and everything coming out. But it's not a very and then there are, in one of the buildings we also explored the idea of a electronic bird repeller kind of situation, which kind of you put it on the facade and it done that. I saw one building in Doha the other day where they put eagles as on the facade itself, so which kind of scares the pigeons from coming in. So and it became, I was first thinking that it's something, but they put it like a decorative element in the building, and it creates its own fascinating experience on that building itself. So I think the fraternity has to come together to do it, and at some point of time create a. Singapore, I believe, has addressed this in creating that they have made sure that there are sufficient birds are kept outside the city, and they have some laws which make them to drive it away is allowed in Singapore to make it happen. So
the last question for the day is that how do you rate the facade industry currently in terms of contractor, in terms of client awareness, in terms of architectural awareness? It's just how do you rate them? What do you feel is the loophole, or what do you feel could improve in the facade industry right now?
I'll start.
This to all.
My first thing would be that we definitely have to make sure that the curtain wall fabricators speak to the non-glass, non-ACP material people, and ensure that that particular part, like you said very correctly, the stone, the JRC, the cement sheets, the terracotta facades, those material people and the curtain wall people aren't speaking as much as they should. I think it's very important that they all speak.
That's a good
We
point.
have got our glass and aluminum. We have cracked it. We know how to do it exactly, and we are absolutely sure enough testings have been done and everything else. The testing of different materials along with aluminum, because aluminum by far is the fastest way, and unitized systems are the way to go when you want to speed up your construction, and the detailing of the way it is, the airtightness of it and all has been tested. So we know it works. So now we have to ensure that that works along with the newer materials, and I think that's the challenge which the industry should
The whole building envelope.
make it happen.
Anup?
I kind of believe that where we are right now, the performance expectations of facades are just increasing by the day. The expectations both from client, architects, engineers, it's increasing. So it's going to get more and more complicated. So there is a long way to go, both internationally and nationally. We have obviously in the subcontinent caught up to a large extent with what's there internationally, but there is a large way to go. But having said that, particularly with facade material in context to the subcontinent, I believe we need to explore a lot more other materials. I mean, as Nilab said, glass has been explored enough. And we need to start exploring more materials and develop that further. That's something that's still not happening to the level that we would, as architects, want to happen. More materials and technologies to make them long-lasting, sustainable facades.
But is it because of the awareness of the client? Is it because of the if I talk of terracotta now, the client starts feeling it's very expensive. That's the first word which comes out from their mouth. It's expensive. Why don't we go for stone cladding? Or why don't we go for ACP cladding? That's what happens. So is that the reason why it is happening? Is it because of the awareness of the client, or is it because of general understanding?
I think I cannot blame the clients. Really, we are the experts. I mean, architects, consultants. We are the experts. Until we explore and we give a solution to the client, I think the ball's in our court. I simply believe the ball is in our court.
Maybe you're saying that you need to explain it to the client in a better way.
And there are hundreds of mock-ups that are happening, and clients are spending money, and I'm sure they would be more than happy to spend a little more and explore more materials. It's just that in the race to finish projects, I mean, some of that things have become too fast that we are not exploring as much we should be as professionals.
Rahul?
Yeah, so I fully
Just one point just before the thing is that when you mentioned this terracotta, we have a very vibrant terracotta industry in both Kerala, in Bengal, and other places.
Right.
And it's not that we don't have it. It's just that we are kind of the Europeans could explore this facade and the detailing of how it comes up with grooves and everything else. They could detail it, and they are now importing and trying to push that idea through. Saying that okay, let's have a terracotta facade out of Europe. But we have these states and all that have fantastic clay and terracotta as an industry has been very vibrant there. It's just a matter of how we take up that material and incorporate it in our facade is where I think if we can do that, I think they are one of the very robust materials which are being made here. So it is a matter of our own industry. Now it's time has come for Indian industry to explore India the way it is. And I think all of us architects should definitely encourage.
If you look at local houses in Goa and Kerala, you see terracotta as a main, you don't even, they have such different options, which we don't even use it for the facade right now. Like tiles, like, soffits, you've got everything, but we don't use it. I think you're right. I think we need to explore that idea of having some manufacturers, the industry to, develop that, to ensure that we start using it in the facades. And it's also good for the industry rather than importing it here. Okay. Rahul?
Yeah, so I fully agree with what Nilab and our group were talking about on saying that somehow, as a manufacturer of a product which is going into as a facade application, as well as providing the solution and the system of how it can actually be installed, we need to promote it and propagate it a lot more. About 10 years back, when people spoke about fiber cement board, nobody 10, 15 years back, nobody ever thought about it as an external facade material. It's
Right.
in the recent years, suddenly it's become very popular. Now, when you talk about terracotta colors and everything, so there are options. You can either you can paint it or you can pigment it. So there are manufacturers, people like us, we are experimenting with the pigmentation process also. We get a terracotta color, a yellow ochre color, various colors, and some of the samples I've shown around, people seem to have liked it a lot also. We're doing these little pilots, and if we find this commercially viable, there is a market for it. Why won't manufacturers go ahead and come out
Right.
with a product? But the essential part is, I think we have to, as very necessarily said, that we need to talk more and communicate more. That communication is probably what is lacking.
Right.
Yeah, I'd just like to put in a point over here. I think part of we are so used to importing building material. And in our manufacturing industry, and all the people in that realm, to come to us, architects and facade consultants, and show us that the quality that they are giving over here is equivalent or better than. As architects, with a topic, I'm very scared to take risks with material that I haven't used, and I'm not sure it's up to the quality that would be coming from abroad. So I think that bit is also kind of, people are taking the short route, importing stuff from Italy and the US and Germany, and we all know this is EN, whatever test standards we are going to. I think that also is time there's a gap over there.
But Roop, let me correct you there. We are just importing material, but the point is, it's all about the system in overall. Like I import a terracotta, but I'm having a rain screen system. If I don't do it right, it's definitely going to fail. So any material can fail like that. So it's
Yeah,
not.
sure. I agree with that.
That. Gautam, the last take. You can give the last call on this facade.
I think I sort of almost heard a concern when you were saying about clients finding terracotta expensive. I think one thing is commercial compulsions. People are building to sell. So at the end of the day, when you say why can't we use ACP instead of terracotta, I think the experimentation and architectural exploration is not for the lack of materials, but at the end of the day, you have a COC figure that you need to comply to. You need to really build. And the problem with facades is you need a structure to make the building stand. You need your MEP in place to make it comfortable. Facade will basically be whatever's left behind. So I think the challenges are, okay, you have to dress up your building, you have to cover it, but this is how much money I have. So I think the playroom is very limited there. I think the day buildings get treated as a product where people or buyers and potential investor become more aware that yes, it's a premium product, has better value, has will sustain its value over the next 20, 25, 30 years, then I think that the demand will sort of emerge in the market, and that's when the clients will not shy away from using terracotta or other brighter material.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's more of the awareness and more of how important is it. If they treat them as their own baby, then I think it will work.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very interesting conversation with one of the developers, and we asked them a question about maintenance, and I threw a question saying, "What if one of the glass in your curtain wall breaks? What will you do?" Because I mean, I was sort of keen. If you own a building like that, what will you do if a glass breaks? He's like, "I'll drop the curtain and I'll call my estate agent. I want to sell this house." So the level of awareness in whether you need maintenance from the outside, how will you replace the glass, that just does not exist.
I think you're right. I think I'll leave it to the audience to ask questions. Thank you all panelists. I start with the first question to Nilab. It's from Anu. She said, sir, you have showed one of your residential project in Andheri. You also mentioned that wind was a challenge because of its height. Can you tell us how did you cater to this challenge at the top floors?
It is not as much challenging as I would say most other buildings that we have done, especially because this entire building had balconies outside, both on the sea-facing side as well as the non-sea-facing side. And the height of the sliding windows and the in both living room, bedroom, and everything else was not more than 2.4 meters. So, and with that kind of that's hardly a challenge. The challenge I think was more for the glass railing, and there we did a fair amount of testing in terms of the kind of pressure that the railing faces. And after having done those tests, those horizontal tests that we started fixing those glass railings on the balcony. The window itself, where the challenge was only I think the span for the living room was 4.5 meters or something. So that wasn't really that big a challenge, I would say. The top floor, the penthouse had a curtain wall, but curtain walls, like I said, have already evolved over the last 20, 25 years that it's been in this country. And this building was not that high. It is 24, I think 30 floors. So that's not so much of compared to what we felt with Imperials and Dubai buildings.
I mean, Imperial was more challenging than the residential in Andheri, right?
Yes.
Because of the height and because of the curtain wall. I think the whole building was curtain wall, right?
Right.
The next question is to Gautam. Which facade material is the best? It is from Akshay Paple. Which facade material is best to use in city like Mumbai for high-rise buildings?
Okay. Wide open question. That's almost like my wife asking me, what do you want to eat for dinner? I think it's about what are you building? Are you building a residential building? What kind of windows do you want to put on it? What does the architect want? And what does the client want to see in their building? How much money they have to invest? I think at the end of the day, material selection, which is city specific, also needs to address the climate that you're in. The kind of design you would go with. If you have a very rainy city, a very dusty city, then you may not want to have a lot of ledges. If you have a very bright city, very hot city, then you may not want to have a very high amount of glass on it. So I think there's a number of questions and concerns. But then if you really want a glass spire in the middle of a desert, that's Dubai, there are ways to address those questions as well. It's the end of the day what you want. So I think that as a question is more for the architects to address.
Right. Nilab, you could address this if you want. You have other questions also for you in your list.
I'll take the next set of questions.
Okay. This is from Arvind Manke. He's a CFO in Navi Mumbai. Can anyone explain about norms for fire safety measures along with norms they follow while designing the facade? So I think that could be to the architects and to the consultant, facade consultant. So you could answer it separately.
Right. Can I go first?
Should I repeat the question?
No. Can I go first? I mean,
Yeah.
Since it's open. I think the concerns around fire is about learn from our past mistakes. And if you see any of those major fire events that make it to the front page of the newspaper, what typically goes wrong? You have buildings that have the facade on its face that burns or promotes burning. Cases where you may see a little bit of fire, but you have a lot of smoke inside that kills people. Or there are cases where the facade detaches itself from the building and falls on a bystander or on property adjacent to it that causes damage of life and property. So I think it's a three-pronged approach. One is the facade itself should not be flammable and should not be a cause of fire starting and spreading on the building. Grenfell is a classic example. Wrong choice of material, it just created a spire in like matter of minutes going up the building. So that has to be done at the time of design, where you choose the right materials, you choose the right finishes, which need to comply to some of the really well-defined standards that deal with flammability, that deal with smoke generation, that deal with droplets forming. Second component is about compartmentation, which is making sure that somebody else's mistake of learning or turning on their gas in their kitchen, or having faulty wiring in their house should not be burned by somebody that's living above him or below him or to the side. So I think trying to seal up compartments of individual tenements properly so that the fire doesn't spread or smoke doesn't spread and you get enough time to evacuate people. And that's about passive fire and passive smoke separation strategies that again come during design. And then finally, I think it's about construction so that the material doesn't come off loose. So things are robustly fixed onto the building. So I think at any point, the fire can start to compromise the structural integrity of the facade. Nothing should come off loose off the building and fall on someone. So I think it's just basically every step of the way, there are certain checks you need to make sure that you comply with before you go into construction.
And plus follow the codes. I think we have a code book which we follow. So I think that is something which we generally do for all the projects. Anup?
Yeah, more or less in line with what Gautam said. One point that, a couple of points I would like to add on to it is for fire, we need to be sure if there is a gap between the structure and the facade, that needs to be treated properly so that the fire cannot rise or smoke cannot rise in between that gap. That's something that's very important, needs to be addressed. And second is, I think, now becoming part of code, or it is already part of code, that you have to have sprinkler systems very close by to the fire to the facade system. Cool the facade in case there is fire next to it.
Right. Nilab?
Yeah, I think I quite agree with both the panelists. And recent buildings, we have installed the sprinklers next to the curtain wall, and there are barriers that we do between floor to floor as well for ensuring that the fire doesn't transmit from level to level. And like Gautam said, it's about selection of material and ensuring that the materials that you select are inert and do not by themselves transmit fire. So I think that way, and of course you have to follow the codes completely the way it is. And I think architects have, like I said, been quite responsible on this.
And I think nowadays what is happening is the responsibility of the facade contractor is also increasing in terms of fire. Like, in terms of fire stop, they are responsible, and the agency who does the job is responsible, and they need to give a undertaking saying that it's a 2-hour fire rated and it's going to work. So I think that is something which has happened over the past 3-4 years, and I think we should be thankful to the CFO for making it stringent.
Absolutely.
The next question I have is for Gautam again. Why stainless steel facade is not so popular in India, whereas we have we have seen many good buildings across the world in stainless steel facade. This is from Sandeep Kumar.
I think cost could be the number one reason. Stainless steel as a material itself is about 3.5 times as expensive as aluminium is. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why we haven't seen much stainless steel. I mean, if you look at the stainless steel clad buildings, even abroad, they're sort of iconic signature towers that have sort of a free hand on funding. You look at the Twin Towers in Kuala Lumpur, the Petronas Towers, you look at Jinmao that Nilab showed in his presentation. They are sort of city icons. So I think they would really want the building to age gracefully, age well, be a little timeless. I don't know. So far, I haven't come across anyone wanting to experiment with stainless steel. Cost becomes one of the most prohibitive reasons. So
even though it's a better material in terms of thermal conductivity, I think it's low thermal conductivity compared to aluminum. But point is that I think it's because of the cost. And one more challenge we face generally is the finish. We don't get that finish here in the stainless steel cladded buildings. I don't know why.
Now, I would like to add to this that besides having solid stainless steel as a material which you see in some buildings, I had explored this idea of both titanium and stainless steel. You get stainless steel composite panels also. So there are manufacturers who are willing to offer stainless steel composite panels, and I think if at that time they were not fire rated. So we were thinking of it in one building, it didn't happen, but the idea was that you get them, and if you can do that with the fire rated stainless steel cladded composite panels, I think it's something which you could start looking at. But composite panel itself as a concept is going down and being replaced by other materials. So it's something which we could definitely look at. There are some fabricators out of Dubai who were quite keen to come into India to install this building. So, but I think post pandemic, the budgets, the way they're going to be, it's going to be some time since we're going to see that.
I think it's a budget also. We have done a project in BKC, which is the soffits are in stainless steel, the canopy is in stainless steel, and it still remains clean. But the point is, it's all about money. It's all about how you spend money and where you want to spend the money. The next question which I want to ask is to one. This question is from Shantanu Mishra. It is to Rahul. Sir, we are all aware of Everest. Is there in HD boards? But do you have the entire facade system, including the basic structure that holds a board? Kindly elaborate. So he's asking, do you have the whole system or you just sell boards?
No, we have the whole system, including the light gauge framing system. In case light gauge framing system is not needed, then there are other alternative systems. We have board also available with us, and we give the entire system with the fasteners, the fixing systems, everything. I think I answered that earlier also, but just reinforcing it, we give the entire system along with design and detailing if required.
Okay, so you give the design consultancy also for the system.
Yes.
Okay. The next question is from Anil Sati. What is the best facade solution in terms of cost, maintenance, and sustainability? This is a very tricky question. I think the facade consultant can answer that. Gautam?
You said it's a tricky question and then you throw it to me. Again, you can't win it all. So it's basically what's your first priority. I mean, is cost going to be an overriding factor? Then you basically keep cost in place and then try and solve your other questions sitting in that cost domain. What was the other things? Cost, what else and what else?
It is cost, maintenance, and sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably tick the boxes to some extent, but I think it's not going to be a win-all situation. If you really want like highly sustainable materials, then maintainability may become a bit of a question, where you may use cradle-to-cradle products which are highly water-absorbent, which attract a lot of mold growth, etc. Which may need to be cleaned very often, and then you can use something like stainless steel, which is non-biodegradable, or use like composite stainless steel, which will be highly maintainable but will be expensive. So I think it's a three-pronged approach where you need to really figure out what the most important is.
You mean what is the best balance? You need to balance everything, right? That's what you're saying.
Precisely.
This question is from Pradeep Tyagi. You got a lot of questions, Gautam. How the design of facade caters the challenges of self-breakage of glass because of nickel sulfide in high-rise buildings? So you're talking of nickel sulfide breakage on glass.
Yeah,
how do you cater to it?
Well, we try and avoid glass selection that can lead to nickel sulfide inclusion, which is try and not use fully tempered glass, try and work with other methods of heat treatment which do not lead to nickel sulfide inclusion. In some cases where the wind pressures are high, in some cases where the load conditions are extreme, where we do end up using a fully tempered glass that has a small chance of nickel sulfide inclusion, we try and minimize it with heat soak testing. And if we have to use it where there's a potential where it may break and fall on its own, then we always do lamination.
Right. Or you use a heat strengthened or a laminated glass. I think
I mean, heat strengthened is the go-to solution, but if you do end up using, in some cases you go up to like 12, 16 mm glass also, but you can't use heat strengthened because of excessive stresses in glass. Right. You have to use fully tempered, then you use it in a laminated form always.
So we use laminated glass in some cases, so that's something which you need to look at, right? For a high rise at least. The next question is to Nilav and to Roop from Rohan Matre. It is advisable to use glass curtain wall in residential buildings is it advisable to use glass curtain wall in residential buildings? If yes, why? If no, why? So both ways you have to answer it.
You can't get away by saying yes or no.
Get away without an answer.
No, I'm quite open to it. I mean, it's been used. I mean, it's been used completely abroad, so it's a regular feature simply because of the way because of the ease of the way it can be installed on the building, and a unitized curtain wall system especially for high rise, super high rises, and everything else. Is the way to go. In India, it has been used. You've seen examples of that in Bombay, and recently there have been 4 or 5 nice buildings which have come up with fully residential. I would say that you should think of glass not always as a transparent element. Glass has a transparent element and it has got a opaque element, in the sense that when you use it in spandrel, it's an opaque thing, but from the outside it looks like one glass. And when you use it in a spandrel system, then you can get the certain same amount of U value that you can get out of a solid block wall, which you can get. So you can spec the curtain wall to the effect that you don't have any energy losses just because you have used glass. But for the portion of the glass that you have actually used, and the percentage of it which you have used in your building can have its own effect on the amount of thermal heat gain that you get. So most of the new residential buildings have very high spec glass, which ensure that you don't get that both the glare and the thing. But in terms of more and more, the high-end residential apartments are almost becoming fully air-conditioned spaces, and by choice, people are wanting to have it. Even though you still, even in the current set of buildings which have got regular windows and balconies, people are closing it and making it fully air-conditioned. In that situation, one would say that why not then have fully curtain-walled building and have only emergency or very partially opening curtain wall system, which could be, one can use it in the residential building. So I would say that yes, that's the answer for saying why you should and can use, and why you should not. Why you should not would be, the point is that yes, at some point of time you are coming home and if you love fresh air, if you like your breeze, you like your wind coming through, then this will still get you a fair amount of wind. You get that little devices along the curtain wall which you can put, and you can still have a wind coming in without opening the window as well. So you have a lot of technology for doing that. But just that opening up the whole window without having to have a tinted glass when you want to see the natural sky, then I'm sure I would not. Then curtain wall is not the way forward.
Right. Okay, Roop, what is your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nilab's kind of covered it. Probably cost would also be, but I mean, depending on the kind of housing we are talking about. In a middle income group housing, probably cost would be a prohibitive factor. That's one. And secondly, our design, given the kind of climate as abroad, where it's colder climates, you have heating, cooling, it's all mechanically controlled. It's more common to use that, whereas in our kind of climate, where we have more balconies, you tend to stand more on balconies. The usage of curtain wall is less. And having said that, there are lots of buildings which have used residential buildings, which have used curtain wall, but not to the extent that you would see in a commercial building.
Right. But I feel the bigger challenge is the replacement of glass. When you have societies, there is nobody who takes the responsibility of replacing a glass. So generally, you find broken glass on the building, which is not replaced for ages.
That's a good point. Yes.
So anyway, this is again to the architects from Deepak Makwana. Why most of the commercial buildings have glass facade despite India being a tropical climate country, while heating more and consuming more energy to cool down? Why not design according to geographical location? I think you have answered it previously, but I think it's just a note you could give.
Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that, you see, I'll tell you the whole history. Our first glass building was in 1989, I think, when we did the DLF Center at Delhi. At that time, we used a single pane glass, and that time, and in that also the building was the first time I think the curtain wall was got into the country by our office there. Habis had worked on that on Capital Place and created us. Then there was like a wave of buildings which happened from 89 to 93, 94, when a whole lot of fresh single pane glass used to be used. Sometimes people made mistake of using the silver on the outside to make it more and more shiny, because that time it was a great trend to make the building shine. So
You see the reflection of the sky.
yeah, like the whole idea now you kind of shine the building, and it's like how you go for a wedding. So it's like the building used to be that. So, but subsequently, as we started understanding it, and as we started doing it, and I think after that the double glazed buildings came in, and they had a far better thermal performance in terms of how it got done. And then subsequently, that time I think when we did Gateway, it was the first time we used a double silver Loei glass building, and we managed to get, I think, with a light transmission of I think more than less than 19%. I think so. That gave us a huge amount of thermal comfort. Then subsequent to that, in probably post that, I think 2000 or something, we started getting Loei glasses. So then when Loei glasses started coming in, we got the thermal performances of the building started improving further. And then we kind of managed, by still keeping that monolithic glass look that you wanted, or kind of made a combination with granite or some other material, we could control the amount of visible light transmission or the number of vision panels within the building by creating different sill levels. Sometimes we used to bring that thing down. So we kind of control that to ensure. So while from the outside you might feel that the building is completely glass, it not necessarily mean that it's completely glass from inside and you're getting that much amount of heat coming into the building. So glass is being used more for its inertness of its materiality than for giving it a certain look. It's not necessarily that every glass building is like a thermal hotpot.
This question is from Poonam to Gautam. What precaution or provision you put in facades for fire safety point of view?
Yeah, I think sort of repeats the question that came in before.
The smoke seal and the fire. Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, this is an interesting question to the architects. It says it's from Ajay Pimple. They say Western countries are generally shifting towards high-rise strict build with cross-laminated timber. Do you think wood can be a part of the facade design and sustainable architecture? And if not, why? See, everybody is asking why to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be. Again, it can be, and it is sustainable. But wood as a material, timber as a material, used to be very prevalent here. There is no doubt about it. But in the last few years, couple of decades, or even more, maybe, it's kind of used extensively, and it's not used thus structurally much. So yeah, it can be used. It's not been used extensively. We just have to kind of readapt to that technology of how to build with wood, and as long as there is enough replanting of trees, there is a green trail where you use timber and it's replaced. Yeah, it can be used. It's just not come in as of yet.
But do you think there's a lack of expertise to work with wood?
Yeah.
But they can't work on structural wood. I think it's difficult to. So we generally rely on international companies who come in, and then it becomes expensive and it becomes too complicated. Is that something you feel?
I think laminated wood CLT has a great potential, and people who are basically the North American wood manufacturers and are trying to promote it here, and they have been quite successful in terms of promoting that technology as well as how it's going to be used as a curtain wall material. Yes, it can be used. Only thing is that I think our codes have to be slightly altered to ensure the way the timber behaves in this thing. It has to be certified. So suppose you were asked that can you certify this particular thing, so you need to. So if you ask like how you can design or structurally decide on aluminum or steel or glass, then you can't. There is a slightly different way of how to calculate for CLTs. So that joining details with that EPDM, the way it comes and meets the class, and that little accessory that you need for doing it, it's available. It's been there for, I think I saw it 2002 last when so it's been there for quite some time, but it's not been so popular in India. And to answer the question about, yes, all of these are made out of forestry. It's all FSC certified, so it's being controlled forestry, which allows timber to be used for construction. And timber to me is a highly sustainable material, so I think it's something which we should look at it.
Right. I think actually what is happening is how it is used for small residentials, like villa in Lonavala or something. We are doing a project there with CLT. Now the Canadian company is coming in and giving all the technological backup for them, to get that CLT done. So I think that is what is important.
Can I add a little bit of background to that?
Yeah.
See, wood seems to be making a big. I've read a few articles and I can share it subsequently, dig them out and share it later on. But it seems to be making a big comeback in Europe. And one of the factors that seems to be leading it is one, in terms of a framing system and everything, the expansion and contraction is not that high. Right. The other thing is carbon footprint. The carbon footprint is becoming an area of concern, and especially with steel, manufacturing of steel, it's a big area of concern worldwide. So some countries are actually trying to encourage the use of timber and wood more than others, because essentially they're concerned on the carbon footprint.
True.
So there's been some articles floating around on this. I can share it offline sometime later, whatever is required.
This is from Priyanka Krishnan to Roop and to Nilab. It is actually for Gautam, but I would ask the architects this question. How do we explore design while working on facades of government and private building projects, which usually tend to have a budget base? What would be the option for making complicated facade design economical and sustainable? So I think the architects can answer, then we have the facade consultant answering, because he doesn't design the concept of the building.
This is a very long question and very general. I mean, again, irrespective of government or private buildings, it's what the client wants, right? I mean, if today we have a certain kind of government building that has been built by CPWD or the PWD all along, and the new government officer wants something different, a complete glass facade, which is happening now, we'll do that. So it's completely on the client, and we will give them options once we get to know. So I think that's the first part of the question. How to make a complex facade more economical? Again, it's general. What are the materials involved? If we can choose materials which are relatively more economical, and use technology which is more economical, we can try and make complicated facades cheaper. It's just that how much cheaper is a very, very wide question.
Yeah, I would say it could be a local trade, which could be used for the government buildings. Then I think we can make it cheaper. Not cheaper, inexpensive, you can call it. Like a brick. You could have an interesting brick wall for a government building, which could make it look very complicated, but very interesting.
Sure.
Nilab?
I think totally depends on the chief engineer in charge in case of government building. We have been fortunate enough for a couple of our government projects. We had a very dynamic chief engineer who was willing to explore and extend the thing. And of course, that client itself also had a good budget. So we could explore things like stainless steel mesh facade. We could use steel facade. We could use curtain wall. We could, in fact, also use cable facades there. And but it is a tricky thing, because anything which you deviate from the standard DSR or the CPWD norms, then you have to start getting write down the specs and write down the BOQ item and then take market quotes and then justify it, and then you go through the tender committee process and then make it happen. So it's not that you can't, but it's a slightly longer process to bring in a new system which is a non-PWD DSR standard item out of the thing. So it is possible to do it. It takes a little longer, and you need to have a strong internal team which will push it through their own internal committees. As to why should there be a distinction between a government versus a private, the decision today in a private corporation, in a large private corporation, is almost similar to what happens in a government. So I don't think, unless it's a strongly personality-driven company who can take a call, say, yes, I want a damn good iconic building and let my team come and do it, then it's fine. But otherwise, you kind of have the same processes running through any corporate today. So that way, private and government doesn't too much difference, except that a government officer is far more liable, so he's far more careful.
True. So they like to show, I think it's his call whether to what does he want to use in the building, making it look glassy or making it look more conventional, and that's what they're saying.
No, it's not about glassy versus conventional look. It is about the fact that the question was that how can you make complicated facades in a government or a public building? How can you make it more economical? How can you make it like that? So to make it economical is about how you can break down that complicated facade into smaller manageable entities such that it can be easily addressed and can be done and fabricated in a simpler manner. And then you kind of convince the fabricator, even though it looks complicated on the total, it's just a sum total of larger parts. So, and then you take it forward. So, and when in a competitive government bidding, you generally do get fairly good rates in this thing, and then you take it forward from there.
This is the last question from Joy Bhattacharya. How do you look at the potential of glass solar panels or LED screens for the glazing facade walls as a solution towards today's sustainable solutions considering Indian conditions? So basically it means that what is the potential of solar panels, either in the form of a louver or a screen, or and media walls also? What is the potential of it in the Indian industry? I think it can be answered by anybody.
It can be done. I don't think it's a challenge. It can be done.
No, I think primarily it's the efficiency and the cost. I would say that is what I would. It's not about using it. It's about using it in the right place and getting the efficiency out of that out of the product. So I think media walls is again, it's about the cost and the ROI. How much you're investing and where is it and all that stuff.
Media wall, I'll explain to you. Media wall, we have tried media walls in some of the buildings. There is a law which says that you can't have moving images on a building. So you can have it only at strategic places. So you can make the building slightly more graphic, but you can't make it like a video wall. We tried it on malls, we tried it on other places, but you can change. Then there is a thing which you said, okay, you can change the scenery at certain points. So media wall is a topic which is kind of bordering between the law and the way it is. And in terms of, so
it's not about technology and this thing. You're saying that it's basically the government codes. Codes don't allow you to design media walls on the facade.
Yeah. To the extent that it becomes it cannot run a movie. Let's be very clear. It can't run a movie.
You can just display an advertisement or something like that.
Yeah.
So then we don't serve the purpose. That's what you're saying. So why should you spend so much money on something which you are just going to display an image?
No, it doesn't. See, if your purpose is not to display, like how I showed in my slide, if it's just colors, if you can just have an Indian flag coming on it, or if there are enough graphical entities which you can bring on a media facade, like a logo or a brand, which doesn't always have to be a video image. So as long as you don't run a video image, I think you can kind of do any media facade that you want.
Okay. So I would like to end the session. Thank you, panelists. Thanks everybody for your inputs. I think we had a good session in terms of understanding all the facade materials, understanding the complexity, and how it can be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, to all our dear audience, Time only allows us so much, but we want to ensure all your questions do not go unanswered. So it will all be addressed on www.askidac.com. I repeat, on www.askidac.com. So tune in soon to have certified professionals give technical and prompt answers to all your queries. And now I would like Mr. Rahul Chopra to deliver the closing note. Handing over to you, Rahul, sir.
Thank you, Devanshi. It's been a wonderful audience. I'm told over 1,500 of you were there. Numerous questions. Couldn't have answered all, but we've tried to answer as many of them as possible. But your answers will be there, as Devanshi mentioned, on the website. But as we come to wrap up this fantastic evening, I would like to thank Mr. K.R. Suresh, who did a splendid job of moderating the entire evening. Thank you very much. I would like to thank architect Nilab Nagar and architect Roopchand, along with Mr. Gautam Bhasin, who were here to share knowledge on the critical information on facades and facade technology, an emerging area of expertise in the world today. Thank you, Team IDEC, for organizing a brilliant webinar, which I am certain has proved to be beneficial to a lot of people. And this is a new form of communication, a new way of communicating with people. I hope you all enjoyed it and have a great weekend. And this is Rahul Chopra from Everest Industries signing off. Stay home, stay safe, and all the best. I look forward to meeting you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Before signing off, I just want to repeat to the audience, all your questions are going to be answered on www.askidac.com. The website details are pasted on the chat box, so you can go through it. Sign up soon. Signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.